life is a numbers game. Okay. And the person that I was reading up on, they were saying that, I think they were talking specifically from a sales perspective, of how a lot of times you can think that you have to get your pitch perfect. You have to get your sales pitch, that is, not your singing voice, but you have to get your
Mm.
sales pitch perfect. You have to get your like 12 steps before you close a deal, etc. And this person was arguing that it's not so much about getting all the prep work done, but it's about getting your pitch in front of X number of people, let's say 10 people. And then once you do something enough times, you're going to start seeing a ratio. So, for example, you might pitch to 10 people and get 0 out of 10. So that's obviously a 0 rating. But then if you do it to another, say, 10, you might do it slightly better because now you've been practicing, and therefore you might get 1 out of 10. So your ratios started changing. And what I found was quite interesting is it becomes like a numbers game or a math solution in essence. And it kind of gives me a bit of relief if I think about it. I'm actually in a bit of a sales role at work. And often, like, if something doesn't work well, after like maybe not even a handful of tries, you can want to like tinker away and start changing things. But if you look at it like, okay, I have to do those numbers, I have to make those phone calls, I have to reach out to a certain amount of people, then a ratio will form. But now the nice thing that you can actually think about is there's a way to improve that ratio with tinkering around with certain things, the way your email looks, the way you approach people, what you say, when you say it. But now that all comes with practice. And this guy was saying, and I forget his name now, but he was also saying that it doesn't only apply to sales per se, but it applies to different areas of life. He even spoke about like dating. For example, you can almost want to expect the perfect person to come on your path and for the stars to align before anything sort of happens, which is fine. But he was of the opinion, like, if you're not asking people to go on a date, you have a lesser chance of going on a date. That's just from a bit of a personal perspective, but I just thought it was quite interesting, and I wondered if you think that's true, because if I think of you, I think of a person who's quality over quantity in general. I
Mm-hmm.
don't. So.
Oh, right. Yeah, it took me 1,000 tries to get the quality. That's the part I
to get
don't show.
That's the part
Uh,
that no one shows, though.
yeah. No, so yeah. Look, I think in the digital age, um, we are much more able to explore this and actually, um, when you were going to go out and let's take a marketing campaign, for example. You want to run a marketing campaign and you're going to plan your media placement and all the rest. You're going to do billboards, you're going to do print. A lot of that's like you got to pay and it's out there and you can't change too much about it. So you're going to spend quite a bit of money to come to that ratio if it's kind of trial and error. And so there was a lot more maybe required in that first rollout. If just in the case of running like online ads, I mean, all these Google and Facebook have these learning phases that any ad enters into, right? Where it's going to test and learn. And as an advertiser, you kind of, you can do your A/B testing. There's all sorts of stuff where you can actually quite quickly put some stuff out there and actually kind of see, it's working. And then based on that, refine and do. So, to do a couple short sprint ad runs and really test before you go big with the thing. Um, and you will see those ratios improving. So numbers game, yeah, it's interesting. If you get, if you're improving, if I don't think, and I think you said it once in the context of improving at something. If you're not consciously looking at why you can improve and looking to improve it, just by repeatedly doing something doesn't mean you're going to get better results. But if you want to improve like a conversion ratio, that you're moving from 1 in 1,000 to 1 in 10, if you run it and you got that 1 in 1,000, I mean, I've seen a lot with like a lot of ads and stuff. You'll just keep running. You'll run something that maybe you got that 1 in 1,000 in the first 100, and then the next 900 is like a waste. So to go and really look at why you are, what can be improved. But I think the digital age allows a lot more of that, a lot more flexibility. You can test user interfaces much more quickly, and look at those ratios much more quickly. So I think there's a definite balance between like thinking things out and getting that initial launch right with as best you can information, and not getting too caught up in, let's say you're going to launch something new, the industry is new to you. You can do a ton of research, you can overkill it, right? And you can eventually actually not launch anything, or you so trying to be everything to everyone because they're doing this and they're doing this and they're doing this, and you're thinking so much through those, the whole thing, as opposed to doing as good a job as possible, making sure there's value in what you're trying to sell. That's the number one. Like at the end of the day, if there's value in what you're selling, the process of how people get hold of that value can always be refined. But if you're selling value and you're confident of that and you're going out with that, it's one thing you're selling a bunch of junk, but then you kind of like, it's all about our 12 steps and our ratios and all that. That's cool. Then you're so worried about that. But if you're worried about if you can deliver value and your values there, then for sure, you by just looking at how you presenting that value and refining that will get you increasingly better results. But I think to just focus on process and selling, focusing on selling as an art or as a skill, you get very good salespeople. But at the end of the day, a good product does sell. People say it sells itself. That's true in many cases, or whatever. It's a whole different discussion. But I think the making sure you have value and then refining that process, will definitely, it is that case of looking at it and going, we can improve this and we'll see a better ratio. I mean, I recently did something where we had run ads and set up a certain campaign, and it got fairly decent results, but exact same product, we just refined that, the sort of user, what would you call it, the customer journey to the end product, just eliminated some steps and looked, and the results were insane. We're coming down to 1,000% improvement on conversions, just by looking at that and going, well, let's take this unnecessary thing out that we thought was important in the first round of stuff, because we thought, we got to convince and tell people why they should be buying this product. So there's so much information convincing. Take that out, fast track to, how do we get in touch with you? We're interested. This is cool. Let's start talking. You see a much higher engagement ratio. Yeah. Don't know. Do you want to talk about it?
There was a few points that I wanted to actually unpack there, because I thought you said a lot of good stuff. I think the thought that I'm on now at the moment is, you can sort of reframe life is a numbers game, sales is a numbers game, whatever is a numbers game, to maybe action trumps inaction in some ways, because if we
Yes,
take
yes, yes.
the advertising example, so let's say even if I, without thinking, played 100 chess games or squash games, right? Eventually, I'm going to get so tired, even if I've put no thought into how to get better. Eventually, I'm going to get so sick of losing that if I want to carry on, hopefully the thought process is going to pop up like, hey, what can I do to improve here? Something's not working. And so
Yeah,
the question is, if I only played, say, 50 games and then stopped, would I have come to that realization? So that's the one kind of caveat, because I do agree, you should definitely keep doing things, or keep trying, but intentional practice is sort of better than just practice makes perfect. I think that was what we spoke about previously. Practice makes perfect is the old saying, and maybe, if you had to reframe that to intentional practice makes
yeah.
perfect, that's that kind of like you were saying, how do I improve this? How do I make the product shine a little bit better, or whatever the case may be? So that's the first point I was thinking about. The second thing that I was thinking about is to go back to your first example about, if you wanted to advertise back in the day, you'd need a big banner on the side of the highway, or something like that, and it would cost you a lot of money. And I was thinking how, in order to get that, you'd have to obviously invest a lot, and you would most likely go to an advertising agency to do that for you. And I was wondering if that advertising is charging that merchant so much money to do this thing, because they've already gone through that process. They've gotten that experience of trial and error. So you're actually meeting that advertising agency where they're at, say after 1,000 tries. And so the chances are that you'll have a better success rate if you go with them. And that's why it's so
Yeah.
much money. And perhaps they've, done played the
I
numbers
think
game
I
of
think that's
advertising.
true. I think that's true in many situations when you're dealing with experts. They've gone through the learning phase. They can, but when we get to advertising,
Mm,
we've kind of opened a can of worms there, because there was a whole movement before digital really took off a number of years ago, like transparency in advertising. So what was happening is, like, the industry became kind of, settled, and you had companies had an advertising budget, and they would just be like, cool, we advertising, so we're doing a bit of print, we're doing a bit of, TV that speak about above the line, below the line, splitting budgets, we're doing billboards, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing radio, put it out there. And the best we would ever get was estimate viewership numbers and stats. Put your ad in a magazine, we tell you how many people buy it, how many people we estimate read that one magazine, how many people are seeing your ads. So these were all like estimations, right? The problem is now, in the case of that, I'm hitting on this, but it's interesting because you then go to this expert agency, right, to get ultimately to get your results, and you believe and trust that they're going to deploy the best strategy because they've learned. They want to sell advertising space. Whether your ad works or not, they're going to take the money you pay them, and there's just that many people that maybe they don't really care if they ever see you again. They sold you a bunch of advertising space. Um, so in that case, it's maybe a bit of a debatable one in that case. But so I think the digital age and metrics, and being able to really, what are your numbers you're generating for other clients, would enable me to more easily part with my money if I wanted results from someone. But back to your general point of going to someone, and I think that's the thing with like a coach. Like, let's say you're doing squash. The coach has been through a lot of stuff you haven't. So So, like, open yourself up and get a bit of coaching. So there's something weird in everything we do. Or in us, weird. We want to be better than what we already are. All right. So you start a new business, you do anything, you like want it to work straight away. And I mean, there's tons of information on like failure is the way to success. And there's like people who've made it and succeeded at different things know you need to fail, right? You'll hear about Elon Musk or these guys who've made it, but like really go and see what they've been through to get there. And so like if you're going to go on your 100th squash game and say, okay, whoa, maybe I need to improve something about my game. Yeah, at what point does that happen for someone? Because it's almost like we want to be able to play squash, or we hope secretly we maybe have a natural knack for something, or we convince ourselves we're going to rent a shop space in town and our business is going to work, but the 30 other shops before failed. And like we're gonna get this right somehow without any external input, um, or humility. And I think humility is a huge thing in this process of really analyzing what needs improvement and consciously then adopting that. You can be so in your own bubble and expert and all that, but if you're not really going like that didn't work, right? Why didn't it work? And really going in and seeing why it didn't work and being honest with yourself, I think the progress and that ratio increase can be very quick if you're selling value. If you're not selling value, stop doing what you're doing. But yeah, so I think that thing of really being able to know at the right point what to change and being open about it. So there's a whole principle that like don't be so precious about what you do. There's a tendency to like, oh, my website, it's so beautiful. I convinced myself it's so beautiful. Don't, no one criticize it. No one criticize my website. No one tell me it's, what I should do and shouldn't do. Okay, let people use the website. Let's get feedback. No one can find the friggin' contact us page. Uh, you know, So I think in this day and age, there's tons of tools that can allow for someone starting or growing a business to very quickly test ideas before it's gone too far. And I've sat with different clients over the years, we'll be like this, you're at the right stage to actually now test and try this thing. You've got a few clients, you've tested the market, you kind of know what's working. Let's refine this whole thing, package huge value into this thing. And then you're pretty much going to knock out the competition if you really go out and launch this from what we've learned. And you'll see a dramatic increase in that ratio.
Sure. Okay. So we're drifting now, but it's important because something that you said about ego and humility, and for me, self-awareness. Like this kind of like, okay, I am my own blocker. It's because of me. It's because of my skill set. I don't know enough. I thought I was better than what I am. Where to from here? Okay. So like immediately I'm curious, how does someone develop that self-awareness? How does someone develop humility to actually because I think if I've heard recently Elon Musk talk, and I've recently heard some other big CEO people that have given a discussion, and often when they speak about themselves, they will at some point they'll mention, I wasn't that great at this, I needed help there, it was actually a bad idea, we had to move on from this. But to your point, if someone gets stuck on their baby in their little bubble, in their little world, then no one, they're done. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever watched one of the most interesting reality TV shows that I used to watch was Gordon Ramsay. I think they were called like I don't actually know the show's name, but he would go into a restaurant, a failing restaurant, and he would analyze what's going on. And
Yeah, fascinating.
I want to say 99% of the time it was the owner. 100%,
Yeah,
like basically 100%.
100% of the
The
time it's the
owner
owner. Who
the
else
owner
was
had
in
like a
charge of that place? The freaking owner. There
and
was
the
another
owner
one.
had
There
a
was another. I can't remember the guy. He came in. He was like this big guy, and he would just be like, he'd observe and he'd put cameras, and then he'd call the owner in and be like, "So you're blaming all your staff, but it's you, right?"
and what was brilliant was almost every single time the owner would sit back and go like, let Gordon Ramsay see, and Gordon Ramsay's going to come to me and tell me, hey, Joe, you're right, this is 100% trash, it's not your fault,
Yeah,
it's because of circumstance XYZ, that's why it's failing, you are perfect. But
exactly.
and the person or people that were able to actually take his advice, some of them did it kicking and screaming, then that would potentially start this rebirth of this
Yeah,
restaurant, and then
yeah.
hopefully, things would
You
go
turn it
well.
around, and you also create an atmosphere. Even in the case of a restaurant, even that restaurant, the atmosphere will be different from there on, because you moved
Totally.
away from this egocentric owner to starting to actually think about the patrons or customers or and the staff, and realize. So no, like it's a big one. And I think, you take any of these guys, who've developed big companies, and that, I mean, at some point they just recognize they don't know everything, but they know to ask for help, they know to inspire, they know to let go, they know to appreciate other people who can run with stuff. They hire people smarter than themselves, so I mean, if that's your goal, to build big company and stuff like that, and it's not everyone's goal, I don't want to be someone encouraging just that's the only way to do business, because you might be an expert, you might run your own thing, you have no interest in it. But if you're trying to build a big company and you're wondering why it's never working, you got to do a check, got to do a little ego check, a little control freak check. And it's interesting because there's a certain amount of control, especially in the early stages of the business, that you need to have. And you need to kind of deploy a philosophy and a culture and a brand. You need to set a tone, and you do need to be interested in that. I think that's important. You take someone like Steve Jobs. People can have lots of opinions over him, but he wanted to convey a certain philosophy, and he got that. He got that right in the end, right? So I think it's important. There is a certain level of control. There is a certain level of what this business stands for, that you need to establish as a founder, as an owner. But you need to recognize at the right time. Listen, I don't know. I believe in the product, but we're not getting it off the ground. Then you do need to do an ego check. There's a lot of people that are so controlling, and trust is a big thing in this. To actually be able to trust other people, um, and let them do stuff, in a way that inspires them, in a way that they feel they're contributing, because at the end of the day, no one really wants to just work for someone else's entire interest, and feel that there's no sort of reciprocal value, or thing I'm not adding value. I'm not appreciated. Job satisfaction, work satisfaction doesn't have as much to do with money as people think. So I think these guys have learned the secret of acknowledging, listen, I'm not, Elon Musk or whatever, they're super smart. Like, let's not get it wrong. They actually are. And maybe they just learn to be humble about that. And in many cases where people would be so caught up on like company policy and whatever, they kind of more relaxed with it, maybe, and that sort of thing. It's interesting, because at some point, like, the corporate thing kicks in with the growing business as well, and you have other people managing departments and policies, and it's difficult to navigate. So it's fascinating for me when you see companies that have grown, to the scale of some of these global companies that were founded by one person. But I think a lot comes down to that ability to know when to say, I don't know.
It's actually makes me think about Seth Godin's book, The Dip. I'm not sure. Perhaps you put me onto that book. Have you read it?
I haven't read the book. I've read a bit of it, and I'm familiar with
The
the
concept.
sort of main thing. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's quite interesting how Seth mentions, and I just like threw his name in there, like as if I know him personally. But he
I mean,
mentions how any
Godin, yeah,
Godin, yeah,
but he's
anything
great.
worth doing anything worth doing, you're going to experience like an effort dip. So, for example, you're going to take up running and it might go well to a degree. And then you're going to get to some sort of peak and then it's going to dip downwards. So, if you think of a graph, it's going to go up maybe slightly, sort of beginner's luck, if you will. And then it's going to dip sharply down. And that's when reality is going to set in and you're actually going to have to eat humble pie, he says. At this point, you're actually going to have to realize that you are terrible at this thing. And then after that, you're going to experience a very sharp decline, and then eventually it tapers off. And then after much practice, it's going to start slowly climbing
Yeah,
until it gets like really at the top. And then you become an expert of that thing. And he says that it's basically happens in like a professional setting, business, sports, chess, you name it. And the important thing to know, and I think so. So obviously, the dip is what the book's about, but his whole philosophy around that is know when to quit, because you only have a finite resource of time and energy, and so you have to know what you're committing to. If you love chess and you want to become an aspiring chess player, then it might be worth for you to go through that. But
yeah,
just know when to quit on something. Don't maybe have 1,000 things going at the same time, because you're going to have to go through this dip,
yeah.
and you won't have the energy or resources to actually
Mm.
do them all.
And it's inevitable, that dip. I mean, that is just the way to progress with anything. So if you're sober minded about it and you go into anything you're going to start doing, anticipate that coming, and maybe coming a few times.
Yeah.
It's possibly more than one dip. So it was Full Night. Full Night, the
Yeah.
founder of Nike. So he's got a great book, really, Shoe Dog, really good to read and
Yes.
eye opening to understand. Man, Nike and founding Nike and getting Nike going, it's not what you thought it was. And he pretty much says a similar thing where he goes, you know, um, give up. There's times you have to give up, but don't stop. It's very
Yes.
interesting. Don't stop. So people talk about never give up, never give. Listen, you can be delusional. This is not going to happen. You are
Mm.
burning all your resources and all your time for this thing, and it's really just an ego thing, proving like give up, right? But don't stop. Okay, so maybe it's give up this, but continue this, or and I think that was the thing. So there's certain things you've got to let go in order to make it happen elsewhere or in another way. And that's many times the thing is you get into a thing, you have a picture of the outcome, you're going, not giving up, entrepreneurship mindset and all the rest. But actually, for that thing to realize it's going to go a totally different route and even come out totally different in the end, and to kind of recognize that and let it be, that's special. That's special if someone can do that.
Mm. I think even if I think of this life is a numbers game topic, for me, I think at the foundation, that's what's important, is this perseverance and
Yeah.
knowing when. So giving up, I'm 100% okay with that, but don't stop. If that thing doesn't work, or then just don't just call it quits. And I think
Not
that's the
not the end
the
of the
big.
world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, good.
All right, cool. All right.
Great.
It's interesting. Perseverance is key. But I think you mentioned it earlier, that conscious, I can persevere at something. and like, yeah, there's nothing coming of it. But to be conscious about it, and not precious, free from the work you're doing, free from what you're doing, in that you can step back, look at it objectively, analyze it, be open to constructive criticism. I mean, there's people that'll just bash anything, and they just coming from an absolutely useless perspective. Don't listen to them. But where there's constructive criticism, and it's really then knowing when to take that. That's very important.